education is a relay race. Thank you so much for having me.
Our second speaker is Miss Ira Ghosh, Director of Research and Learning, Victorious Kids Educares, Pune, IBPYP Workshop Leader for the Asia Pacific region, Evaluation Leader and Program Leader. She is also an independent consultant to IB, non-IB, and alternative schools and IBAN member. Her work has taken her across more than 35 countries, always with early and primary education at its center. She describes her practice as reimagining education so that every decision is informed by research and every relationship built on trust. That is precisely the standard authentic early years education must now meet. Evidence, not folklore, relationship, not routine. So may I invite all of you to show some of your feelings, emotions, with some reactions. We also have a dual voice from Ms. Rimi Chopra, a third esteemed panelist. She's a counseling psychologist, a music educator, and arts-based therapy practitioner. And importantly for this session, a parent in our own school community. She understands what regulation, expression, and presence actually mean for a young child and has been actively involved in her son's journey through the early years. She is also an award-winning vocalist who turned to counseling psychology by deliberate choice, with significant experience in pediatric palliative care and in supporting children and their families through difficulties. Ms. Rimi Chopra, thank you for being here. Right. Let's show some emotions for her too. We are also very lucky to have with us this morning the Director, Manav Rachna International School, Sector 46, Ms. Rashima Ved Verma. She's been an IB educator for nearly 3 decades, associated with reputed IB schools in Delhi NCR. She's also an IB examiner and an exam author. It is wonderful to have you this morning with us, Ms. Rashima.
Thank you so much.
Right. And finally, a quick short introduction to myself. I'll be moderating this session today. I'm Abhimanyu Dasgupta. I'm the Deputy Head of School at the Manav Rachna International School, IB Sector 46. I've been an IB educator for more than 2 decades, also an IB trainer and school visitor. Having worked with educators and schools from across the world as an IB member and as a teacher and administrator at reputed IB schools in India, I align seamlessly with the vision of Manav Rachna of creating better humans. Right, without much further ado, let's begin our conversation this morning. And my first question is to Dr. Vats. You've watched Indian early childhood education move from being seen as preschool preparation to being recognized as the most consequential stage of a child's life. In your view, what has genuinely changed in the last decade? In policy, in classroom, in parents' expectations? And what changes do you feel are needed to prepare early learners for an unknown future? Over to you, ma'am.
So that's a wonderful question, Abhimanyu, and thank you to Manav Rachna for creating this platform for parents, because it's so important. I always say parents need a sathi and a sarthi, and schools can become that. And I think Manav Rachna is doing just that. So kudos to y'all. Over a period of 40 years that I have been now in education, I have always been with early childhood by choice, because I feel that's where everything begins, and that's where we are doing very less, both as a country, as parents, and as schools. What have I seen in the 40 years? When I joined as a teacher, I saw that early childhood was treated as babysitting. Uh, Importance was never given to the early years. As I became more involved in policy making, and we progressed uh, uh, towards understanding the importance of brain development. I think Bonvita was the first one who said, brain ka vikas hota hai pehle 6 saal mein, and everybody started feeding Bonvita. But I was very happy that at least there some awareness was brought about the importance of the early years. Sadly, what I have seen in the last few years is more of a decline in the understanding of early years because of social media reels. So much of negative content, so many negative ideas are floating around that people have somehow misunderstood the importance of early years, parenting practices. Fear has become much more easier to inculcate in children if you want to bring about changes. If you see the kind of reels that do their rounds these days, whether it is a parent's fear about screen time being given to their child. So you will have all these reels that show that, paint your child's eyes black, show them a scary reel, and they will all stop doing it. So I think over a period of time, we have changed where it comes to understanding the importance of early years, but we've not yet understood why it is important. And I would like to use this opportunity to tell parents that education is a relay race. 85% of that race happens in the primary early years, because 85% of your child's brain develops in that period. So which means 85% of your parenting, your expenses, everything will happen in those first 6 years. And I would like to quote Maria Montessori here, who knew this almost a century ago, that the most important period of life is not that of university studies. It's the first one, the one between the ages of birth to 6 years. So I feel, yes, a lot of change has happened where policy is concerned, government awareness is concerned, private schools awareness is concerned, and parental awareness is concerned, but there's still a long way to go to give it that same importance. It is still treated as social welfare and not yet a starting point of a child's life of learning, of personality development, of socio emotional development.
Thank you, Dr. Wirtz. And I must tell all the participants that there are some lovely resources Dr. Wirtz has kept ready for us to share with us at the end of the session. So stick around. And let's hear a different perspective from Ms. Ira Ghosh. You work across international frameworks as well as Indian classrooms. When we say the changing face of early education, what is actually changing? The pedagogy, the child, or the world the child is being prepared for?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for getting us on a Sunday to have this conversation. And genuinely, I think I'm also enjoying these questions. So thank you for framing these questions, Abhi. I think that's a really nice question and also a trick question. So how I'm going to answer it is probably to say that all three are shifting, but they're not really shifting in sync. And that mismatch is the story that we are here really talking about. So a child, let's go by three of them. So the child fundamentally is really not changing, right? A typical 5-year-old still today needs movement, stories, relationships, safety, trust, the unhurried childhood that you mentioned. What has changed is the world, that perhaps we are in one of those phases that the world is changing faster than ever. And in order to cope up with that, we are catching up with our pedagogy. Now, again, just like how Dr. Swati mentioned, century ago, Maria Montessori mentioned something that today we are gathering on a webinar and talking about its importance. So again, this is not something, the neuroscience or the research is not something new. It's something that we've been knowing it for a very long time, but perhaps we didn't have the right people speaking up in a larger number, and probably we didn't have enough evidences backing it up, which right now we do. We have curriculums and schools and people talking about it. So I would say the child, I believe, is not really changing fundamentally. It's still the same requirement. The world is really changing. And then we are realizing the importance of the pedagogy, catching up. And then at the end of it, I think we are all here to protect the child from this, the childhood, I would say.
Right. Such a lovely message, Ira. And let me move on to Miss Rimi, who's a parent. Her child is in these years. As a parent who's also a counseling psychologist, you're in a unique position. You see your own child at home, and you see so many children professionally. What made you look for something different in an early years program? And what were you actually worried about when you began that search?
Thank you for that question. I don't think anybody asked me that before, and it really made me think how that process has been for me so far. So just to give you a little background, my son was homeschooled till 4 years of age, and this was a very conscious decision made by me and my husband. And now that I look back, I feel this was a blessing that happened to us as a family. It gave me a deeper insight into my son's strengths, his interests, his needs. We wanted a school that provided a safe space, a nurturing learning environment, had a strong foundation for early childhood education. Also, most important, but this was the deal breaker for me, that are they open to communicate and partner with us in nurturing our son? If not, then I don't think that is the right place for us. So, and I see my son as a very curious explorer who loves to wonder, question, have conversations with people to understand the world around him. He continues to choose mud play over football, building things with miscellaneous materials around him, loves to read and is inquisitive about everything. I needed a school that could keep the spark in him alive and nurture his personality further rather than molding him into be someone that's acceptable just because it's the norm. In fact, I was also mentally prepared to invest myself in continuing our homeschool journey further until I found the right school for my son. I visited many schools and I did something on the go. I realized I was making a very big mistake. I stopped making a 10-year plan. I narrowed down my search by asking this question: what does my child need for the next 5 years? This was a game changer, and many of the big names just got dropped off organically. So, yeah.
Right. I think that's a very practical suggestion you've shared with parents who are on a similar search. Thank you for sharing that perspective. Let's get a little deeper into discussions on pedagogy. And I'd like to ask this question to Ms. Ira about different pedagogical approaches. Nestlings draws on Montessori, Reggio Emilia, and the inquiry-based pedagogy of the IBPYP. Help us understand how these philosophies actually converge in practice.
Okay. I'm going to try my best and do this without any jargons. Probably we could have a Montessori workshop and a Reggio Emilia workshop and an IB workshop. So let's do this. I would say they converge because the methods must be different, but at the core, they all have the same belief, and that being that the early years children are competent and capable, and they need to have their voice in their learning. That's where they all meet. Now, Montessori gives us a more structured environment. It promotes a lot of independence. The child is an equal partner into what they do. And then the adult steps back and allows the child to figure it out in a simple language. It's way more complex than that. But in Reggio Emilia, it pushes us to help children express themselves way beyond language, which is just the literacy. It gives us 100 languages to use, which is also symbolic. There could also be more than 100 languages. You could never limit the number of expressions the students at that age group, the children, can have. So what it says is that uh, through play and a bit of an unstructured environment. The children, a typical 3-year-old, should have many more mediums to express themselves, because in that age group, the speed of their thought and the speed of their language is not at par. They are seeing and understanding and making sense of so many things, but they don't have the language for it to say it. So Reggio Emilia says that, you know what, there are 100 and plus ways that they could express themselves. And then PYP talks about inquiry. And beautifully, even PYP now, even they evolve, right? It's one of the curriculum that keeps upgrading and updating itself comparing to any other curriculum framework. And that's what I really personally like about it. Even now, early years has become an important section. It has its own planners and documents within the PYP itself. So PYP also is honoring the child being right at the center. It promotes the inquiry. And at the end of it, it says that the young learners are also, they co-construct meaning. They co-construct meaning. They're not here just to receive information or some amazing facts or DKs or XYZ. All of them, at the end of it, they believe that a child is competent. They honor the curiosity that they are born with, just like how Miss Rima said, you wanted a school to keep that spark. I'm mom to a 5-year-old myself. And I think the biggest heartbreak I will ever get to see that he, in the name of being grown up, he no longer does those goofy things and asks fearless questions. That's just so beautiful. That's the inner child that we all are trying to kind of awaken now later on. So I think all three of them really honor the child at the center and look at the child as a competent, capable human being.
That's so well put, Ms. Ira, and I can see your personal connection to that response. And of course, at Nestling's Manav Rachna, we are blending all these pedagogies. And a lot of schools are talking about inquiry-based and experiential learning. All these earlier schools are using some of this jargon and some of these catchy phrases to attract parents. Dr. Wirtz, what, according to you, should be at the core of the pedagogy of early childhood education?
So I feel brain development. When we talk about all these words, agency, etc., neither teachers nor parents actually understand its essence until you explain to them brain development. And that's exactly what the theorists who came before us did. Whether it is Froebel, the father of kindergarten, or Montessori, or Piaget, they all studied the child and how the child learns. So today I'm going to give just very 4 simple facts to parents, because once you understand that about your child's brain, you will understand why all these philosophies or pedagogies are required and how they connect to your child's learning. So the 4 different parts of the brain that every parent and teacher must know about. The first 2 are the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain. Now, the right side of the brain is the first part of the brain that starts developing when children are born. And the right side learns through songs, games, and stories. The right side is also in charge of long term memory. So let's put these 3 facts together. It tells us if I want to teach something to a child for life, I have to do it through a song, game, and story. So there comes your play based education, etc. Left side of the brain, what does that do? It asks questions. And why does it ask questions? Left side is in charge of short term memory. If it wants to put any information, wants to push it into long term memory, it will ask you questions. And that's why, if you notice, children at this age ask you the biggest questions, the most number of questions. And what do we generally do to that? We say, abhi nahi, bahut puchte ho, etc. So we don't let their left brain do the work that it was supposed to do. Left brain is in charge of short term memory. So we need to understand it that if I want to teach something to my child for life, I will have to do it in an interesting manner, something that will make it go into the right brain. And then comes your upstairs brain and your downstairs brain. Your upstairs brain, this is where your intelligence is. This is where your logical thinking is. But this brain is controlled by your downstairs brain, which has a part called the amygdala. Now, the amygdala is the security center of the brain. If it perceives any kind of stress, it shuts down this brain. So, what is stress according to amygdala? Of course, fear is stress, but even boredom is stress. So, if you're going to put your children into too many classes, one after the other, children are going to end up feeling bored. If you're not going to listen to children's choices or give them choices, they are going to feel bored. So, stress is not just about screaming, shouting, fear, it's also about having less agency. When we talk about agency, that you didn't give me choice is something this side of the brain, the downstairs brain, loves. And that's why I tell parents, you want your child off the screen, stop scaring the child. It's not going to work, because that scary thing that you told the child will get you an immediate reaction. It will get you change for a short period of time because it went in the left brain. You really want to bring change about your child's screen habits or any habit, do it through a song, game, and story, and it will go in the right brain and it will stay there for life. So it is very, very important for parents to understand, when the downstairs brain shuts down this brain, you need to wake it up. How do I restart it? And it can only get restarted with songs or with oxygen. So, which means when we are upset, what do people give us? They give us a glass of water. Why do they give us? Because water has oxygen. So, when you sing to children, the left side of the brain listens to the words and the right side of the brain listens to the rhythm. So, the minute you sing to a child, both sides of the brain come together and it wakes up the thinking brain. So, look at the power that we have in our hands. Generations did it for us. You remember the rhymes that were sung to you when you were a child, or the lullabies that your mother sang to you, or the stories that your dadi told to you. What's happening today? We have Alexa and Siri doing that job. And then we say children are listening to machine voices. Naturally, they will. At my emotional moment, if I did not listen to a human voice and I listened to a machine voice, then whenever I am upset, whenever I need something, I will go to a machine. I won't go to a human. So these are basics that once we understand it, every pedagogy, everything, Reggio ho, Montessori ho, स्टाइनर हो, सब समझ में आ जाएगा. IB हो, non IB हो, you will understand it all, that why does this all happen. Just understand these four parts of the brain. Become a brain builder. Don't be a teacher. Don't be a parent. Your job is to build a brain. That's it.
Wow, that's such a powerful response and so scientifically based. Thank you, Dr. Vats, for sharing that perspective with all of us. And I think these are facts that we kind of seem to know, but it's always challenging to practice. And in Reggio Emilia, also, there's a lot of this understanding of the left-right brain connection. It is a way of thinking and learning by doing. And they promote it through the setup of ateliers, which is not just an art room, but a dedicated studio for expression through materials, light, clay, sound, music, movement. Miss Ira, you've had some experience in running these ateliers, and I wanted to know from you, what does this experience in an atelier really do for a 3-year-old's cognition, and what does it demand of the adult in the room?
Yeah, very good question. And I think the name itself sounds a bit scary. I think it's not a very common name. So I think I'm going to try doing something here, that the very first time in my educational journey, when I saw a really fancy atelier, and I came back home trying to figure it out, that this is so fancy and this is so nice. This was like about 10, 15 years ago. There are still people joining the webinar. Anyways, I think it's very strange, and I've never really shared this in a gathering. It took me back to my childhood days. I was raised in an army compound, so we were super safe and we could go around. And there was a wall across a bank which was on the road. And because of the sunset and sunrise, the wall would have different reflections on it. And for over a year, that was our secret place. And then that would be our good morning place and our dining area. And I don't know. I was really young. And with all of us, we had the best time simply because the reflection of the sun and the shadow on that wall, we felt it's our private space. that's the kind of atelier we all had as childhood, right? We didn't have really super fancy rooms and things, and that's pretty much what is it doing now. And I keep reminding myself, because the world is moving away from functioning the old school that we did. So we're really coming up with these special rooms and special activities to simply make the kids do what we did once upon a time, openly outside in our communities, right? The loose parts were all around in our garden. So I would say it's what people think, because of, again, social media. There are a lot of pictures. There is an assumption of what is it supposed to look like. There is a Radio Emilia South Africa Alliance that does create ateliers for African children in slums with very minimal equipments. So what really it says, it's not a maker's place, maker's space. It's not a place for the children to build something. It's really a space for the children to think in a medium that's beyond language, again, itself. That's why it's a very Radio Emilia specific. So again, as we mentioned in the beginning, a 3-year-old, what they can grasp, the kind of questions they can ask versus the ability language to being able to have it. It's a space that is not very overstimulated. It has just the right amount of equipment, and babies and children are naturally really pulled towards light and shadow. So imagine a 3 and a 4-year-old is exploring the relationship with possibility of these natural elements around them. It's all constantly coming to creating hypotheses, the cause and effect. What Dr. Swati spoke to us, this is where the balance of the left and the right brain comes into the picture, wherein they touch things, they solve it, they explore a lot of things, the reflections, light, and sometimes water. However, the role of a teacher, I would say, mostly in an Asian country or India for us, is the hardest part. Because one thing that you really need to have as an adult in that space is to restrain back. Really do not finish a child's thinking. Do not appreciate a final product, because that was never the point of coming in that room. The idea was not for you to create something beautiful and take it out. The adult has to really step back, document, observe, and kind of see who they are for themselves. So it is really not a room that parents or educators need to make sure there are decorations on the wall, or there are beautiful reels created of kids doing something similar with the cloths. It's not optics, it's not cosmetic. It's really about what's going on inside that room. And it takes me back again to my childhood memories. We had 0 adults. With that reflection on the wall for over a year behind that bank, there was none of our parents. Probably my mom still doesn't know that's what we did. But I had one of the most amazing time being able to figure out, where is this coming from? Is there a tree? There were no adults. So I think that's something that the whole helicopter parenting, parents wanting to have an evidence of learning to the depth from school, stressing out the teachers to constantly have their mobiles out and put evidences and click pictures of how your child is learning. Adult role is the most complicated one here, I would say.
Yes, it is a tough negotiation of how much agency students must have and how much agency does a teacher need in that room. Thank you for sharing that personal anecdote to make us understand. And just to go back to Dr. Swati's comment about the importance of music and singing in early childhood, Ms. Rimi, you are a music educator and arts-based therapy practitioner. You understand rhythm, sound, and movement as development tools rather than entertainment. What do you see happening to a young child's regulation, attention, their confidence, when expression is treated as a serious language of learning rather than a filler activity?
Thank you for that brilliant question. And Dr. Swati, I think, has made my job easier to respond to this one. I would say that a child's journey with music starts from the womb. The sounds of the womb become their first music, and the mother's heartbeat their first rhythm. So it is no surprise that when a newborn is placed on its parent's chest, the sound of the heartbeat gradually helps them regulate. Many families try to recreate the sounds of the womb using white noise, and it is reported to have better sleep benefits in infants. So, yes, music does play a vital role in the child's overall development. Let's go to language and communication. It happens when children are actively engaged in singing songs with adequate repetition. They learn new vocabulary, new words, and slowly it becomes part of their everyday vocabulary. I'm not talking about playing Alexa and listening to it, on the background. No, the teacher singing with the child or a parent singing along with the child is what makes a real difference. Active music engagement helps improve listening and memory. Action and movement-based songs support physical development. Yeah, coordination and motor skills are being worked upon. Interactive songs, call and response, and other musical techniques improve impulse control, turn taking, and hence supports the social emotional development of the child. Music education gradually helps increase the attention span of the children. Aren't we all, with this question as a parent as well as an educator? The child doesn't sit for more than 5 minutes. Let's get back to the roots. Let's involve them in more arts-based engagements, and you'll see it translate into the other classrooms. Music education gradually helps increase the attention span. It is a non-threatening way of learning concepts with a higher retention rate, as Dr. Swati rightly mentioned. Every new word, melody, or song learned slowly compounds into shaping the child's personality and confidence. And all these skills will eventually support the child's learning in the classroom. And that's what we all hope for, right? As an educator and a parent.
Right. Thank you for sharing the benefits of having a strong music program in early education. We've discussed a lot about the pedagogy and the approaches and how we must blend all of this. Let me now shift focus on to Ms. Rashma Verma. And I wanted to ask you to share some insights on how Nestlings by Manav Rachna was conceptualized and how it kind of caters to all these aspects of early education that our panelists have shared.
I think the entire concept of nestlings comes across from the fact that there is not one pedagogy that works. Like many of our panelists have already spoken about the fact that we have the Reggio, we have the Montessori, we have the IB inquiry, and all of them place the child at the center. We also have seen many international and national curriculum, while we also spoke about the NEP. We also know that the Australian curriculum, the New Zealand curriculum, and the Finnish curriculum are hugely child-centric. So when we were looking at our own early years program, we looked at different aspects of what we do. We decided to add more elements, be more mindful of what we do, and also ensure that we are giving the best preparation in the childhood. We've all spoken about the fact that the early years is the most important time where the maximum brain development happens. We wanted to create a curriculum that is board agnostic in many ways. We wanted to create a curriculum that does not support one curriculum pathway or the other, but a program that looks at good education at that age. And I think that is how Nestlings was conceptualized. And we did a bit of, not a bit actually, we did a lot of research. It was almost a year long where we looked at the best curriculum, we looked at the best approaches. What is it that we want to keep? What are we very mindful of doing? And I think that is what this attempt is. And I'm very sure that we will continue to evolve as we deepen our own understanding and what works in our context, because, everything is contextualized. What is the experiences that the children are having at home? What is it that we want to complement with that? So everything will get added, modified, but the real thought process was that can we create a program that encompasses the best of all approaches, the curriculums that have been created, the approaches that have been well researched into an early years program that is not based on any one curriculum, and that allows a child to have the best beginning to their, to their academic journey, so to speak. And I think that is what we wanted to do.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Rashma, for sharing that bit of background as to how the nestlings idea emerged. Let's talk a little about policy in the Indian context. With NEP 2020, it's finally brought the 3 to 8 years band into the center of the policy through the foundational stage. From where you sit, Dr. Swati Vats, you've worked with so many organizations, you've been looking at these matters for so many decades. What has genuinely translated into practice on the ground, and what do you foresee as implementation challenges?
I think what has genuinely translated is that we are here on a Sunday morning talking about early childhood, educators and parents together. So I think that's where I feel the change has happened. We are now able to look at early years, not only as that entry admission into a school, but as somewhere the school's education actually begins from. We have, I think, moved from thinking of it as just play to understanding how play is connected to learning. You know, Einstein said that play is the engine of learning. So when we talk about that, how can you have a train that runs without an engine? It's as simple as that. You can't have learning if there is no play. I would also urge parents to have a look at Jean Piaget's. He started off this uh, concept of understanding play schemas in children. It was then extended by another expert, but it's very interesting to know that anywhere in the world where you go, there are 9 things that you will see in children's play. So, whether it's rotation, they love to rotate, or trajectory, they like to throw things, or positioning, they like to put blocks together, or connecting, that's why they like Lego so much. So when you understand that why do all children around the world play in the same manner, you realize that this is how the brain actually learns to learn. So which means, I think, over the period of years, we've now understood that our job in the early years, both as parents and educators, is not to teach children what to learn, but how to learn. I think even parents as a community have understood that it's okay if my child doesn't know how to count numbers or recite numbers or chant numbers up to 500. At least my child knows how to count one on one to one correspondence, and able to understand number 10 or number 20, or understand the concept of real life. I think what has changed is we've understood during the pandemic also that learning is not as important as learning with socio emotional development. And when that is not included in the curriculum, we have children who grow up without values, without ethics, without a connection to their family, without a connection or the ability to collaborate. So if you look at everything, I would urge parents to read an essay which says, "Everything I know about life I learned in kindergarten." Everything that you are learning in the early years is going to help you in your career. It's as simple as that. So if you think that the time to plan your child's career is after grade 8 or grade 10, you are making a huge mistake. Your all the abilities that your child will need in any career, and the most important is collaboration. I would like to tell parents this, that we think that the board percentage is going to define my child's future. Well, you are wrong. Board percentage can be as high as possible, but if I'm not able to collaborate with teams, if I'm not able to have cognitive flexibility, if I'm not able to make instant correct decisions, if I'm not able to understand the difference between rights and responsibilities, I'm not going to become a successful individual. So that all happens in the early years. So I think that's the change that has happened, and that's what we should all be looking at. Sadly, we are in a world which has screens and AI, and we tend to get carried away with it as adults. It's here to stay. Stop telling yourself that I'm trying to keep my child away from it. Please don't do that. The child is going to grow up in a world that has technology and AI. Prepare them for it. Teach them safety. If you're watching a screen, take a break. If you're watching a screen, take a break. Go outside and play. It's time to take a break. If you're watching a screen, take a break. Why don't we sing these songs to children? We sing songs about traffic lights to them. So it's very, very important, friends. We have to prepare children for their world, not for what we think is going to be the future. My kindergarten teacher did not prepare me for a world of AI, but I'm surviving in it because she gave me certain skills which are called life skills. And that's what I think is the change that I'm seeing around and wanting around when it comes to education, early childhood education in parents and teachers.
Right. And I think one of the resources you're going to share at the end also talks about this invisible thread,
Yes.
how early years actually leads to university, and how this connection that you're talking about that is built in this stage actually, plays in good stead in the long run.
Yes, I'm also sharing something called the still face experiment.
Yes,
It's a
yes.
very old experiment, but it's very valid now. I have been talking to a lot of people that why are we not making children aware about AI safety? And they say, nay, nay, nay. If you see even the CBSE and all say grade 3, we should talk to them about AI. There is something called digital animism. See, children at this stage are at a stage of animism. Animism means they think everything has a life. So the table has a life, the teddy bear has a life. And in this kind of a stage, you have an Alexa and a Siri talking to them like a human being, which means they think that's a human being. That's digital animism. So we have to prepare our children for the safety, just like we prepare them for good touch, bad touch, for safety, body safety. We now have to prepare them for technology and screen and AI safety. So the still face experiment is very important for parents to understand that if you are not going to give that attention with your face, with your eyes to your child's emotional development is going to be deeply affected.
Right. We'll move a little from the discussion to looking at the NEP 2020 again, but from a different point of view. Ms. Ira, there's sometimes an assumption that international frameworks and national ones pull in opposite directions. Where do you think the NEP's foundational stage goals and the IB's PYP inquiry approach actually reinforce each other? And what does a school gain by holding both?
Okay. And then I look at NEP 2020, the foundational stage document, and then I have a look at the IBP by Ps. And to me, it looks like it may be written by different people at different time in different parts of the world, but the both are actually solving the same problem. So we're really having the same dialogue. So I don't think it's fair for a lot of parents to think that the NEP is now accommodating international. Because of an NEP, now it's easier to accommodate the international, something like a PYP. But I think NEP 2020 and the document is genuinely an Indian articulation of the same thing that PYP has been talking about. So they are very much aligned. The document is actually written down. It's talking about play-based. It's talking about moving away from assessments. The document talks about activity and experiential-based. These are genuinely something that we've been talking in PYP as well. And a good part here is about 20 years ago, 15 years ago, not even 20 years ago, a PYP educator really felt like an alien going outside and speaking about these terms, because the national element of it as a country, we did not speak these languages. So we used to be looked at that, what are you talking about? It's the same age group. Why such complex stuff? But the moment it's come into the national curriculum and the same term and the sentiments are being added, it really feels like that, okay, irrespective of what school you are working in, irrespective of a PYP or an CBSE or something, as a country, we do believe that these are some non-negotiables when it comes to the early childhood. In fact, the NEP's own language, somewhere it's written that explicitly the literacy and numeracy should emerge from experience and not just drilling. That is genuinely a way for an Indian document to be speaking. So I think what the school, I personally think we are, no matter what PYPA, whatever international curriculum frameworks we have, we are still in a country, right? So we really have to respect we are Indian PYP school, Indian XYZ school. That's very important. So a school holding both of them really tightly, one of them is, of course, giving you an international benchmark for a program like PYP. That's again globally recognized and one of highly researched programs. It remains to be one of the highly constantly updated and researched programs. And then you also know that nationally you're aligned and you're speaking the same language and you're respecting the country's document that's come up. I genuinely find a lot of interesting and good stuff from the NEB 2020. I happened to meet someone from an education ministry of Australia, Victoria region, who looked at me and said that, you know what, your NEP 20 is stronger than our Victorian document, and I'm really impressed. But the only difference here is that how populated the country is and the speed of being able to translate it into every classroom versus a state like Victoria, which is like really faster and it's easier to implement things. That was a few years back, and I have a lot of respect for someone being able to say that, which means it's really getting it down to the schools rather than just being stuck on the document. But I hope that answered your question.
Right, thank you. A lot of parents, do feel that a child who's 0 to 6 should spend maximum time at home. Why does the school day have to be very long, or just 2-3 hours in school is enough? Rest, they can be in the comforts of home. And I addressed this question to both Dr. Vats and Ms. Rimi. How should a parent think about the choice of a shorter or extended day at school? And more broadly, how do we design earliest provision around the realities of working parents without turning school into childcare? This is a dilemma that I think we are facing in early years education in an evolving society.
I
Please
think,
share your take.
Abhimanyu, I'm so happy you asked this question, because for generations, we have given a guilt to mothers that if you work, your child has to be put in care. I think we need to get out of that. If you look at work, every woman has always been working, whether in the fields, whether in the home. You always were working, but you had a larger family, and the child was with somebody or the other throughout the day. You did not have a mother only looking after the child. So that extended family, because the joint family has broken down now, that extended family is now your daycare or your good quality school. So stop making a mother feel guilty that I have to choose between home care or preschool. If the care is care in both the places, then I don't think a mother or a father need to worry about it. The question is your child being cared for? So I think that is more important. We have had schools in the UAE where we don't have that much of maternity leave as much as is given in India. So you will see 3-month babies are in daycares in UAE. So, but you don't see the mothers feeling guilty there, because they have ensured that they have put their children in a good daycare with qualified teachers who understand their child, who understand what children need in the age group of 1 to 6 years. So I don't think we should be talking about whether home care is better or daycare is better. Care is care. If you're getting the same care, I think if you're getting qualified, I think we should focus more on qualifications. As a country, we have not focused on qualifications when it comes to early years. I am always fighting with people that 3 months is not a qualification for a good early years teacher. So you need to have proper qualifications. I feel parents, instead of checking for toys and ambience and I know in North India, parents also want live streaming of CCTV, which is so dangerous. That means your child's live streaming is going on 30 parents' phones, and you don't know what they are doing with that live streaming. That is completely bad. But instead of focusing on all that, I would say ask a simple question. What is the qualification of that teacher who's going to take care of my child? Once you have that, you don't need any CCTV, you don't need anything, because then you have built a relationship of trust. Because where there is care, there needs to be trust. So my stand is this.
And from a parent's point of view, Miss Rumi.
Thank you for sharing that, Ms. Swati. I think bang on. Why should there be guilt revolving around having quality care? And as a parent, I must admit, I often feel that it's so hard to ask, the school, what is the qualification of the teacher? Because, you somewhere wonder whether you'll be looked down upon. And I would like to share here as a parent of, Manav Rachna IB, that one of the major reasons I chose this facility, even though it was in its first year, was that the team came with about on an average of 9 years of IB experience, which I don't think I would find anywhere else. So, but I'll get back to what Mr. Abhimanyu put across. As a parent, my personal wish would always be for a shorter school day again, so that the children get more time to bond with their families, unwind, and have ample time for outdoor play, free play. However, today's reality is that the family structure and scenarios are very different from what they used to be. I know how I have walked the homeschooling path as a nuclear family in outside of India. I was not in India at that time, so it's hard. It's a lot of commitment. So we see nuclear family setups, and with both parents working, there is a huge reliance on childcare support and also early enrollment of children into schools, which I also saw for the first time. I noticed that in Vietnam, like Miss Swati had mentioned, 3-month-old babies coming for childcare, because that's what the need is. Many families in this scenario prefer schools over leaving their child alone at home with a nanny, as they are seeking support not just for their basic everyday needs, but also social interaction, imparting values. ये वैल्यू इम्पार्टिंग होता था हमारे ग्रैंड पेरेंट्स से या हमसे, अब वो नहीं हो रहा है. तो ये कहाँ से गैप फिल होगा? From the school. Conceptual learning, and of course their safety, all these are now in the nice laps of the school now, and I consider this scenario as a school being a second home for this child. There is no question about it not being. This responsibility, I feel, is huge, and schools need to redesign their programs in a way that caters to this unique need.
Right. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. And I think an interesting dilemma, conflict sometimes we are facing as schools, as educators, as school leaders, is that children, though we see families wanting to spend more time with them, children are arriving at school with shorter attention spans, more sensory overwhelm, and less unstructured play behind them. And Ms. Rumi, you work with emotional regulation also professionally. What do you think a school can realistically do about something that largely originates at home?
So, Mr. Abhimanyu, this has been a pressing concern for me too, as a parent. My observation has been that there are fewer children who are regular in the playgrounds these days. Most children reach home late after school and then are hopping to extra classes. In spite of being a regular at the playground, I had a very hard time building a network of friends for my son. Considering we had moved countries and moved cities a couple of times, this was my 6-month project, I would say. I noticed adults stopping children from playing in the mud because it's dirty, Our surroundings are so digital heavy that keeping a child away from screens has become a challenge. Toys come with flashy sounds and those bright lights. Parents, are so feeling so guilty about not being available. They try to overcompensate for their absence by filling up their child's playrooms with more toys and games, many of which are rarely touched and played with. So schools now have a larger responsibility than just impart education. The school space has to be designed that calms their senses than overwhelm. Natural light, display in the classrooms that supports learning than becoming a distraction. Windows with blinds when needed. Large open spaces where children can move about but also can be barricaded to compartmentalize a space when containment is required. Designing experiences that have a connection to the real world, more sensory experiences using mud, sand, water, clay, and different textures, allowing for unstructured play time every day, avoiding screens as much as possible because there's a lot of that happening at home already. I can bet on that. So
Right, thank you. And I just had a look at the clock and I can't believe it. An hour has passed by. Such warm, engaging, meaningful, insightful conversations. So I have a last question before we open the floor for questions from the audience. And this is to each one of you. I'd like to end with one thing each of you would want every parent in this session to carry home today. So, to Dr. Swati Vats, the one belief about earlier education that Indian parents most need to let go of.
That it is a preparation for primary years. It's a
Okay,
preparation for life. By looking at it only as a preparation for primary years, you are limiting the capability of your child or that of the early years. It's a preparation for life. It doesn't prepare your child for the next stage of learning. Everything that your child will need in their life, the foundation of that, 85% of the foundation of that is laid in the early years.
right. To Miss Ira, the one question a parent should ask their child's school and the one question they should ask their child.
Okay, the one question you should ask this school, and I think I'll piggyback again on what Dr. Swati said, is that of course check for the qualification of the teachers, but ask the school. There's so much you're talking to me about what you're doing for children. What do you do for your teachers? How do you invest in your teachers? Because a healthy, capable, happy teacher can only translate back in the classroom. So what system do they have in place to make sure that the teachers are also being nurtured? And beyond the qualification, how are they being handheld and helped in terms of growing and understanding more in the classrooms? I think it's really important to ask the teachers, how do you invest in your teachers? Do you even have a budget kept aside for that? You'll be surprised about what kind of answers you'll get. And from students, you might not like this answer, but if you're talking about early years, don't ask them questions because the moment you ask them questions, that's because you want very specific answers of what question did you ask in school today? What did you do? What did your friends do? I think simply you keep the dialogue flowing, you speak about your day, and bedtime stories are one of the most beautiful time that your child will tell you everything that happened in school. But the moment you're asking questions, you want a child then and there to give you a specific answer. So, yeah.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. To Miss Rimi, as a parent, speaking to parents, not as a professional.
I think looking back at my journey into finding a school, I would say spend time listing down your family values and your child's needs for the next 5 years or so. And I would say the right school for your family may or may not be the top listed one in your city. And this is huge. I see many parents rejoicing that I got into this and this school, but after a year, they are unhappy about their decision because the groundwork, the reason for being there wasn't really thought about. So spend time doing that, and I'm sure you'll find your way.
And finally, to Miss Rashma, as a visionary leader and administrator, one thought that you want parents to take away?
I think what I really want parents to take away is that that understanding that times are changing. The world that you have walked into is very different from the world that your child will inherit and walk into when you talk about your workplace. And hence, your school should not look and be the same as your school was. Your child's school should not be exactly the same as what your school was. What worked for you in your context may not work for you and your child. It may work, it may not work, but the thing is that we have to be very cognizant of the fact that world is changing and changing very quickly. And it is very important that when you look at a school, you look at the fact that where is the education building skills in my child, which will allow them to become resilient, which will allow them to seamlessly move from one kind of a workplace to the other, and so forth. And I think that is something that I would like each parent to think about very carefully. Sometimes we get very comfortable with what we have experienced and we feel that, well, I turned out well and so will my child. But we have to understand that we walked into a very different school, the world as vis-a-vis what our child will be walking into. And I think that's a reality that should be at the center of our decision making.
Right. Thank you so much. We'll leave the floor open for a couple of minutes, if that's okay with everyone. Please put your questions in the chat, and then we can pick up some questions and invite the panelists to respond to them.
We have a hand raised.
Hello everyone. I am Deepak and I'm a father of a 2.5-year-old. So, first of all, thank you so much for this lovely discussion. It was so inspiring and motivating to listen all of you. So, my question is to Dr. Swati, ma'am. So, ma'am, I like when you mentioned about music and play and stories. Uh, so, I am also a firm believer that stories are very powerful tool for a kid. But for the parent like us who are not so creative to create rhymes, music, and stories which are actually helpful for their kid. So I started looking for resources and books online on online Amazon and bookstore. But for a 1 or 2 year old, I found that most of the books are either academic focused, like learning alphabets, colors, and the story books are like they are so not designed for younger toddlers. They are basically for uh, older kid. So I want to know. I mean, where can we find good resources or good books?
You don't need resources. So let me tell you, there is a duck, there is a tree, and there is a boat. Chalo story banate hain. Okay. I went for a walk and I saw a duck. The duck was standing near the tree. Now I started walking with the duck, and then I saw a river, and in the river was a boat. I thought of driving in the boat, riding in the boat, and the duck followed me. Quack, 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 quack. A 2-year-old needs to hear words. A 2-year-old needs to hear sounds. They want silly stories. They want that connection with you. It's not actually about the story, it's about sitting with you, having your full attention on them, and just talking to them. And think of what it does to their brain. Silly story. You can do it in bath time. You can even sometimes, if your child has started, you will say, you tell me now which one do you want. It's about that connection which has gone away because we are looking for resources all the time. We don't need resources. This is also something that the commercial world has told us कि हमको books चाहिए. कौन सी दादी ने कभी भी बुक हाथ में लेके कहानी सुनाई थी? दादी माँ हमेशा आपको अपने लैप पे बिठाती थी और कुछ ना कुछ कहानी सुनाती थी. Or and I think it was some dadi who said Chanda Mama because she was in that mood and everybody became a Chanda Mama. Make ridiculous stories about anything. As I said, children are at the stage of animism. उसको उसको चेयर भी जिंदा लगेगी, उसको टेबल भी जिंदा लगेगा. So you can make up your own story. Don't stop yourself. I think we're putting too much of burden on ourselves to make perfect parenting. There is no such thing as perfect parenting. There is no such thing as a perfect story or a perfect toy or a perfect timetable. Not there. वो perfection में मालूम है क्या होता है? If I were to ask you to draw a house, I can guarantee you all of you will draw the same house. उस पे ऐसा एक roof होगा, 2 window होगे, door होगे. Creativity gone for a toss. I would suggest today, sit with your daughter and just start a silly story which has sounds. I saw a dog and the dog was going, "Paw." Dog ऐसे बोलता है? Dog ऐसे नहीं बोलता है ना? Dog कैसे बोलता है? And then you'll see your daughter giving you the whole thing. So it's all about having fun. It's all about being there in that moment. It's not about that perfect story. Don't even look for it.
Right. We wish you luck, Mr. Deepak, in creating those stories with your child. There's one question here. How can I, as a parent, build independence and confidence in my child? Ms. Rimi, you want to respond to that?
Read up on Eric Erickson, I would say to the parent. Yes, Rimi.
I think just yesterday, my son was having a bit of a meltdown, and I said, "Why don't you come make dosa with me?" And he was like, "Wow, like, can I really?" I said, "Yeah, of course." And my husband said, "Oh, do you know how to make dosas?" I said, "Yes, he's done that a couple of times." And at the end of the whole thing, he felt so empowered. He came back and he said, "Thank you for giving me a job." So that's what I think the children are seeking. They're seeking that kind of independence, the agency, and the trust that they see in our eyes that yes, my parent believes that I can do this. So I think if we can do that in everyday little tasks, automatically we are making our child more independent. We don't have to do much. Just involve them in our everyday life. Oh, why don't you set the spoons? I've been giving him the job of, cutlery, or put the spoons back in the section. And he's like, wow, he feels like, oh my God, I've done such a big thing. So it's easy. It's here in our everyday things. That's what I do. I would like others to share their perspective and experiences as well.
So we also have some earlier educators. Would any of you like to ask a question to maybe Ms. Ida now? You can raise your hand, then we can help unmute you. Or you can post it in the chat. We're getting a question. Anyone's typing furiously? Right. So it's sometimes a child knows an answer, and when being asked, they're shy to answer in front of someone. How to bring a change in the child's attitude? Ms. Ira, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I probably would say this would be a combination of what I spoke about 100 languages previously, and then what a parent asked about building confidence. One, what is the really purpose of at that very moment wanting to prove to an adult that the child knows an answer? We all have been in that situation as kids that, why don't you do a dance? Why don't you see a song in front of the relative? So just an intention of, is this that a child really not speaking up in front of others and that's an issue? Or did you say, yesterday you learned this, why don't you just share with your chachu or whatever? And the child doesn't want to share. So what is really going on here? And I think, again, in early years, we really judge the kids based on how they speak, what they speak, but wherein there has to be many more medium of expression for them in order to get that connection with them. And about independence and confidence, even for us adults, I could be the most confident person right now here on a webinar, but you put me in a swimming class and tell me to, attempt the first swimming competition and I will just get cold feet. So you can really not say that by just doing this today, my child is going to be confident in every single phase of life tomorrow or independent, right? So it's about those constant upskillings and habits that would be there. So it's really okay for them to be, my son is independent in a few things and he's not independent in a few things, and he'll get there when he'll have to get there. So is it developmentally the right expectation? So I feel like sometimes we need to ask ourselves as adults, why does that look like a concern to me?
Right. So maybe one last question, and I'll direct this to Ms. Rashima. How do we as parents and educators handle tantrums at home and at school? Why do young children do that? And sometimes adults do too.
I'm not an early years expert, but I will talk about what I know from my own experience as an educator and as a parent. I think tantrums also are some ways of directing attention to themselves, that this is a mechanism that children have, especially in current time when parents are so busy. If you are doing what you are doing, then your parents will not give you attention. But if you throw a tantrum, often that is a time when a child starts getting attention, and that is one way of, or one of the reasons why our children throw tantrums. I think it's very important that the attention is given to child for all the right reasons. And if they are throwing a tantrum, move them to a positive direction. Even if you realize that you've not been giving them attention and now they're throwing a tantrum, one of the best strategies is to move to something more positive, to say that what Ms. Remy just talked about. She immediately moved it into an area where it was a more of a positive reinforcement, that attention, that feel-good factor. And we are all emotional beings. We have our own moments of tantrums. How are children going to be any different? So I think the idea at the end of the day, when we think about and we look at tantrums, is that we have to role model, firstly, a more balanced approach in everything, because children learn most about from us. If we are shouting and getting our spouse's attention or somebody else's, the child has picked up that this is one of the ways of getting it. And once a child does make a tantrum or throws a tantrum, you move that in a very positive direction and avoid it. And of course, clear boundaries. What is acceptable? What is not acceptable? I think these are some of the things that work very well. I think while I know that this is not really the question, but I think too many parents these days feel helpless and powerless. And, at the end of the day, parents need to remember that they are the adult in the child's life. And adulthood comes with many more responsibilities. A strong relook at what you are doing is often required when your child is throwing a tantrum, as to what is it that you are doing, what is it that you are demonstrating, and why is the child behaving in this manner. Sometimes it could be as simple as not sleeping enough. Children need, they cannot be. I see so many parents moving out in the evening with their children, young children, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, out for parties with their parents. This is not a schedule that the child needs. He's a cranky kid then. So I think somewhere as adults, we need to remember that we need to really think very deep about what is it that we are doing.
There are some more questions, but unfortunately, we're running out of time. But Dr. Swati, you want to quickly share your resources? Maybe I'll drop them in the chat. And we will also email to all those who took part. And there are a lot of resources that Dr. Swati has on our website. I think you can also have a look at some of that.
I'll just put my website in the chat.
Yes, maybe you could do that. These are two wonderful visuals that she's also shared, which I'm sharing in the chat with all of you. Oh, you've put that too, Sahil. Thanks. Sorry. Right. I mean, we'd love to have this conversation keep going. And there's a link from Dr. Swati, where I'm sure you'll find many more strategies to help you. What we've heard this morning, though, is not just a set of strategies, but a shared conviction that the child is capable, that the early years are consequential, and that our job as adults is to slow down enough to notice what is already happening in front of us. My sincere thanks to Dr. Swati Popadvats, to Ms. Ira Ghosh, to Ms. Rimi Chopra, and to Ms. Rashima Verma for their generosity of time and thought, and to every parent and educator who joined in. A special shout out to Mr. Sahil, who helped with all the technical support, made sure those who were dropping off were readmitted into the room. To those of you who are exploring Nestlings by Manav Rachna, our doors, our classrooms, our hearts are open to you. Come and see our learning studios, watch the children in action, meet our teachers, ask us important questions, and we will be more than glad to engage in meaningful conversations with you all. On that note, wishing you a very happy weekend. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.